A few weeks before she died, I went to visit her in the hospital. And in what would be our final conversation, she said something that I will always remember. "I'm scared," she said. "I haven't been this scared since my first night in Parchment." "What are you afraid of?" I asked. She replied, "Not knowing what's going to happen next."
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday.
The day I saw the newspaper picture of the burning bus, this was the original bus with the original Freedom Riders on it. It was attacked and set on fire. And the picture was on the front page of the Chicago newspaper that I was reading. I was just, well, enraged is the wrong word. That doesn't, I was both sad and angry.
And the thought of that, just seeing that picture in the paper, just horrified me. I just felt, how can this go on in our country? Someone's got to do something. So I decided I would do it.
Did you ask yourself, why me? Why am I doing this versus, I mean, other people could have done it. What made you?
Well, everyone can't do it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Why you?
Why me? Well, I was 22. I was unmarried. I had no children. And I'd been interested in civil rights. I said, why not me?
One of the most dramatic applications of the principles of nonviolence came with the Freedom Rides. These were organized by the Congress of Racial Equality, whose members, both Negro and white, determined to challenge the practice of providing separate facilities for Negro and white travelers in the South. From all over the country, mixed groups traveling by bus entered the South. They entered segregated waiting rooms and restaurants in many southern cities. Negroes were jailed for entering white waiting rooms. Whites were jailed for entering Negro waiting rooms. But they were determined to succeed even if it meant going to jail.
These are the other people there who you were arrested with. Daniel Ritchie Burkholder, Lionel Goldberg, Albert Forge Gordon, Stewart Greenstein, Gene Foy Herrick, Saul Barnard, Ralph Robert Rogers.
Well, see, we never saw the men after, once we got to Parchment.
Over 300 Freedom Riders went to jail. Nearly half of those were white. Nearly half were women.
As a woman, I know that there were only 2 women on this particular trip, and you were the only black person in this group. What was that like?
I wish there had been more blacks, but it was good that whites were willing to take the same risks that I was willing to take, and so I guess I didn't feel bad about it, but I wish there had been more blacks. There were a lot of blacks who took part in the freedom rides, but there just weren't many on my particular group.
I think the whites took more verbal abuse and maybe more physical abuse because we were doing it for ourselves. Well, they were doing it for themselves too, really, when you think about it, because what kind of a country would allow other citizens to be treated that way? They weren't doing us a favor. They were doing it for themselves too.
You didn't tell your parents, I believe.
I didn't tell him. He was living here in New Haven at that time, and I was in Chicago.
I knew my father would probably try to talk me out of going.
So I didn't want to argue with him, and I already made up my mind that I was going.
And so the night before I left Chicago,
I wrote him a card from the bus station. As I left Chicago, "Dear Daddy,
if you don't hear from me for a long time, it's because
I'm in jail in Mississippi."
I'm in jail in Mississippi. I'm going on the freedom rides. Don't worry. He was very old-fashioned, and he thought this is something you leave to men to do. And about a third of the freedom riders were female, but I didn't feel that it had anything to do with one's gender.
Was there any fear, any concern?
Oh yeah, not totally crazy. I didn't want to get killed, but I thought, and I was worried that if someone hit me that I would run or that I might strike them back, and I knew that everybody in the movement had to be nonviolent.
We role played so that you knew what it was like to be yelled at, you knew what it was like to be spit upon. But we trained because everyone is nonviolent by nature. And I don't think I'm one of those people. I mean, I would normally rise up and defend myself.
I knew that I didn't want to embarrass anyone, but I was afraid that something would happen.
What did you do the night before?
Well,
Who were you staying with the night before?
We stayed at Reverend Abernathy's house. I remember being nervous at night because his house had once been firebombed. And so there were lights on outside, and there were people walking around guarding the house.
I would like to get a historical background. The Freedom Ride, there was only one. I thought there had been...
There was one in Albany, Georgia. There was one in Mississippi. And I was involved in the one in Mississippi. That's why I went to Parchman.
This is the police record. Received information that a group of people were coming by bus from Montgomery to Jackson. These people called themselves Freedom Riders were on the Trailways bus due in at the station at 1:15 p.m. At 1:38 p.m., the bus pulled into Dock 8. A group of 8 people discharged from the bus consisting of 7 white and 1 colored. Who was the first one to step off the bus?
I believe I was, because I was seated right up front. And so I stepped off the bus and looked to see which sign said white and which sign said colored. And so as soon as I saw the sign that said white waiting room, I headed in that direction with the 2 guards.
You've lived in the North for considerable time where you didn't really have to deal with all of the different colored and white signs. So was this the first time that you...
No, I was quite familiar with it but we went back to Alabama to see the rest of his family almost yearly. And so I was used to separate facilities, like drinking fountains. When we went to the movies, we sat in the balcony with our cousins while the whites sat on the main floor. So I was quite used to the fact that there was segregation. I didn't like it one bit, but it never occurred to me to do anything until the bus boycott began. And then I realized that you could actually change things. Just by refusing to go along with segregation, you could actually change things.
Captain John Ray approached the group, then went into the colored waiting room and ordered them to move on. No one moved. Stated, move out of the station. Again, no one moved. At this time, Captain Ray placed them under arrest.
I think I said to him, when he said move the first time, I said, I have a constitutional right to be here. I think that's what I said to him.
What did he say?
He just said, move again.
Did he physically move
No.
you?
No.
Was there any threat of violence?
The threat of violence was in my head. You know, when I got there, I saw all those people who were waiting for the bus. They seemed to just be hanging around. They were waiting to see if anything was going to happen.
Were these mostly whites?
These were whites, yeah. Blacks made themselves scarce. They were just yelling and making a lot of noise. And I think that's what frightened me as I stepped off the bus. I didn't know whether one of the crazies would come up to me and hit me or what they would do. But they were waiting. They apparently waited for every bus that came in. Whenever they heard that there was a bus coming in carrying Freedom Riders, it was always a sort of welcoming committee.
So you get off the bus, they take you. What was Captain Ray like? What was he like?
Well, he behaved well. I mean, he didn't call us any names. The only time he seemed a little upset was when he was asking me for the race of everybody in my group, and I answered human. He said, well, aren't you black? I said, no, human. So, I mean, he looked a bit annoyed about that. But he wasn't threatening. I felt much safer in the police station than I felt outside at the bus station.
Were you surprised that he was as
He was used to it. He'd arrested almost all the Freedom Riders who'd ever come to Jackson. It must have been old hat to him. To the city jail, and that's where they interrogated us, took our fingerprints, asked us questions, and then we got locked up. This is the first time I'd seen the inside of a jail.
What was that like? Here you are, a University of Chicago graduate, very good student, never been in trouble in your life, I presume, and now you're in jail.
There was the usual Saturday night, Sunday crowd, prostitutes and other people who've been arrested for fighting or gambling, but they were very nice to us.
Were they mostly black?
They were black, yeah.
Because they put you in
separate, right.
Did they know why you were there?
Well, they asked me, and so I said, well, I went into the white waiting room, and they were, yay, you know. So they were very supportive. I guess the first day we were there was probably the most vivid because I remember that they did a body cavity search, and I was absolutely outraged, but there's nothing I could do about it. I mean, I couldn't win, so just let them do it.
We did a lot of singing and talking because they took our books away. I had carried 2 books with me.
I brought the complete works of Shakespeare, and I brought the King James Version of the Bible because those were the 2 things I thought I could read all summer long. But
the jailer took that book away. And he took away also the complete works of Shakespeare.
So we had no books, no newspapers, no visitors. The only news we got was when new Freedom Riders got arrested. They would come and they'd tell us everything that had happened since we got arrested. They were like our news reporters.
How did you get through it after taking all that in for a long time? How did you find peace within yourself?
Well, I found peace the first time I walked into the white waiting room. That was peace to me. Just doing it. Just the act of doing it it felt wonderful. Even though I knew I was going to be arrested, it still felt great. My spirits were lifted by the other prisoners. The other Freedom Riders sang a lot of songs. They talked about their lives. They talked about what we were doing.
How do you feel about the progress this far?
Up and down. The day I voted for Obama, the first time, tears flowed down my cheeks.
Tears started coming down my cheeks as I marked Obama, marked the ballot. And I didn't expect that because I'm not all that emotional. So I really was surprised, but I felt it gave me the same feeling that I got when I went into that bus station. That I was throwing off the past, and rejecting the past, and just doing something that uplifted me.
I never thought I'd live long enough to see a black president. And so that was very emotional. Now with Trump in, who knows what's going to happen.
If I can,
I'm looking for places I can go in case I need to escape.
That it was the right thing for you to do. What will you tell our young people today?
It's the right thing to do to get involved. Depends on what's going on now, because we don't have legal segregation anymore. But we still have racism and all the evils that has brought to us. So I would encourage young people to get involved at any level they can.
All stand. We are having more freedom riders to join Sister Lula Mae. She's been holding down the fort. You come right in and welcome.
Yes, we have been looking forward to meeting you.
Joe Brown. Hi. Glad to meet you. We didn't know you were here, but now that you are, you're our hero. Our hero. Good to see you. John Diamond.
Hi.
Good to meet you.
Last year where?
Paris.
No.
You want to come from here?
I'm fine as long as
I commend you for what you've done, and as a lot of people do as service people, I thank you for your service. I mean, I look upon you as a freedom fighter, a soldier. It's important that the younger generation know what went on before, and that's probably why I want to do this, to kind of record this, to write about it. I just think it's important for people to know, because without you and without others like you, we would not have the opportunity to do it.
It's everybody's responsibility to do whatever they can do.
These are just small tokens of love. There's nothing that we really can give you for all that you've done for us. Okay. Okay. The Essence of Beauty, presented to Lula Mae White, Southern Connecticut State University, March 30th, 2011. And there's a glove here so that we don't get our fingerprints all over it. Okay.
Thank you.
We thank you.
I appreciate all of this, but the fight goes on.
Yes, it does.
I've carried on doing things that the generation before me had wanted to do. The fight goes on. It never ends.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall